The morning I walked into my office in downtown Manhattan, not far from Times Square, and saw another woman sitting in my chair. My nameplate was gone. My files were stacked in a box on the floor. She was laughing with my team like I have never existed. That was the first crack. Christmas. If you're watching this, like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from while I tell you how I took everything back. When I walked into my office that morning, I expected the same quiet start I always had. I always arrived early, before the noise of the building settled in, before people began rushing around with their coffee cups and deadlines. For years, that empty hallway was the one place in my life that felt steady. But the moment I reached my door, I knew something was off. The door was slightly open, a light was on, and I could hear soft laughter. Not the kind that warms a room, the kind that cuts through it. Sharp, young, careless. I pushed the door gently, and that's when the shock hit me so hard that I had to steady my hand on the frame. There she was, the CEO's daughter, sitting in my chair, leaning back like she owned the whole building. She had her feet on my desk, her hair draped across her shoulder like she was posing for a magazine cover. Instead of sitting in an office she hadn't worked a single day to earn. And in her hand was a pen, my pen, signing a stack of documents I didn't recognize. She was laughing with someone on speakerphone, as if this moment was some kind of private joke between them. My nameplate had been moved aside. My family photo was turned face down. The air felt thick, like someone had drained all the oxygen from the room. For a second, I wondered if I had stepped into the wrong office. Maybe I was tired. Maybe the years had finally worn me thin. But then I saw my jacket hanging on the back of the chair, the small plant by the window that my daughter had given me years ago, the binder with my handwriting on the spine. It was all mine, and she was sitting in it as if she had waited her whole life to take it. My heart started beating faster, but not out of panic, out of confusion. This office had been the one place where I still felt respected. After all the storms I had weathered in my life, this was the one corner that was supposed to be safe. Yet here I was, standing at my own door like a stranger. She didn't flinch when she saw me. She didn't sit up, didn't apologize, didn't even pretend to move aside. She just smiled with that spoiled confidence that comes from a life where every door opens without knocking, where every mistake gets forgiven, where every path gets cleared before she even takes her first step. "Oh, she's here," she said into the phone, not even looking at me. "Yeah, she just walked in." No, it's fine. Everything is going exactly as planned." A chill spread through me. Exactly as planned. The words echoed in my mind. Something had happened behind my back, something that clearly involved decisions I wasn't part of, something that had been arranged without my knowledge or permission. And the worst part was how calm she looked, like she had been prepared for this moment while I had been walking around in silence, believing I still belonged in my own space. I stepped forward slowly, trying to understand what I was seeing. There was a pile of files on the corner of the desk, my files, rearranged, relabeled, stacked into new categories I didn't approve. My computer screen was logged out, but moved slightly. Someone had been in my system. Papers I had finalized the night before had been opened and touched. I recognized the smudge on the corner. My pen never left marks like that. Hers did. My stomach sank deeper. Someone had given her access. Someone had allowed her inside. And now she was acting like she was settling comfortably into a position that wasn't hers. Yet nobody had told me. Nobody had warned me. Nobody had even shown me the basic respect of informing me that something was changing. My voice caught in my throat for a moment as I stood there. I wasn't a weak woman. Decades of life had shaped me far beyond that. But this was the kind of shock that knocks the wind out of you. Not because you don't expect betrayal, but because you don't expect it to arrive so boldly, so openly, and with such arrogance. I had worked for this company longer than she had been alive. I had earned every inch of that office. And now I stood still, watching a girl who had done nothing for it act like she was born to replace me. As I stood there, Watching her shuffle my papers and laugh at something on the phone, the truth settled in slowly but heavily. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding that would be cleared up in a few minutes. This was deliberate. This was planned. And this was only the beginning of something far deeper than a simple bad morning. And in that moment, the part of me that had carried years of patience, endurance, and silence began to shift. Something inside me tightened, something old and strong, something that wasn't going to let this moment pass without a fight. When I finally stepped fully into the doorway, she didn't even flinch. She continued signing papers with my pen, my calendar open beside her, her legs crossed like she owned every inch of my office. She didn't look shocked, nervous, or embarrassed. She looked settled, comfortable, like someone who had already rehearsed this moment in her mind. I asked her what she was doing, but she only lifted her eyes halfway, giving me a slow, lazy smile, the kind of smile people use when they want you to know they've already won. It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive, it was worse. It was calm, cold, almost bored, as if my anger, my confusion, my very presence had no weight at all. She pushed one of my folders aside with a single finger, not even bothering to close it, and said nothing. She didn't need to. The silence she left between us felt heavier than anything she could have said. My office, the room I'd worked in for decades, the room where I'd stayed late nights, cried on my worst days, celebrated on my best ones, didn't feel like mine anymore. All because a young woman with the right last name and enough arrogance to fill the whole building had decided it belonged to her instead. I watched her toss her hair over her shoulder as if shooing away a fly, still refusing to acknowledge the weight of the moment. She didn't ask why I looked upset. She didn't pretend to explain herself. She didn't even offer the courtesy of a fake apology. She simply smiled, the corners of her lips turning up slowly, deliberately, like the villain in a movie enjoying the first step of her plan. She had no fear, no hesitation, no shame. That alone told me everything. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't someone mistakenly sitting at the wrong desk. She had marched into my office with intention. She had planned this move. She wanted me to see her here, in my chair, paging through my documents like they were pieces of scrap paper she could toss aside whenever she pleased. Her confidence came from one place. She believed, deep in her bones, that her father's power was enough to erase everything I had built. She believed she was untouchable. She believed I was replaceable. And she believed she didn't even need to explain herself to me because, in her mind, I no longer mattered. She tapped the pen lightly against the desk, still not looking at me directly, as if she were waiting for me to crumble, to cry, or to walk away quietly. She wanted submission. She wanted shock. She wanted silence. But what she didn't expect was stillness. My stillness. Because the more she smirked, the more I remembered every long night I spent building this office from the ground up. Every meeting I led, every hire I approved, every crisis I fixed, every mess the CEO himself had handed to me because he trusted me more than anyone else in this building. So I stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, matching her calm with my own. She finally lifted her chin, just enough to meet my eyes. She was waiting to see fear, waiting to see weakness, waiting to see me collapse the way she had imagined I would. But I didn't. I only gave her a smile of my own. A cold one, controlled, steady. A smile that said I saw everything she was doing, and I wasn't done yet. A smile that said her little performance didn't break me. It woke me up. She blinked once, thrown off just enough for me to notice. Good. That was my first small victory. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a small shift in her posture, a small crack in her confidence, a tiny pause she didn't plan for. Because she wasn't expecting a fight. She wasn't expecting resistance. She wasn't expecting a woman her father's age, someone she assumed was past her prime, as she once said to another intern, to stand firmly, breathe evenly, and look at her with the same cold confidence she had tried to project. In that moment, she realized something. I wasn't leaving. I wasn't surrendering. I wasn't intimidated. Her smirk faded by a fraction, enough to tell me she finally understood one truth. She had stepped into the wrong office, thinking she owned it, but she had just woken up the one woman in the building who knew exactly how to take everything back without raising her voice. And that cold smile I gave her, that was the warning, the only one she'd get. I spent most of my life building the career that led me to that office, and thinking back on it now, it feels almost unreal how many years I gave to that place. I started when I was young, with no money, no connections, no shortcuts. I worked late nights when others went home early. I handled problems no one else wanted. I showed up even when I was sick or tired because I believed that hard work would protect me. Every document in that office had once gone through my hands. Every rule, every system, every process had been shaped by my effort. I trained people who later got promoted above me, yet I never complained. I stayed because I thought loyalty meant something. In those early years, I fought for every small piece of progress. I took extra courses, studied on weekends, and tried to make myself useful in every department. I wanted the company to grow, so I gave ideas, solved conflicts, and fixed mistakes quietly. No one saw how much work went into it, but I kept going. I believed if I kept proving myself, I would be respected. Over time, the office began to feel like a second home. I decorated it slowly with small things that reminded me of my family, my travels, and milestones in my life. Every shelf had meaning. Every file was organized in a way that took years to perfect. My coworkers often came to me for advice, help, or support. I listened to them, trained them, and stood up for them when needed. I tried to create a safe space where they felt respected. I wasn't perfect, but I tried to be fair. When people were scared of the CEO, they came to me. When someone didn't know how to finish a project, they came to me. I was the steady one, the reliable one, the one who made sure the office ran smoothly, even when chaos hit. Over time, I became the person everyone depended on, even if the upper management didn't always acknowledge it. But as the years passed, I began to see something worrying. People with family connections moved up faster. People with charm but no discipline were put in important positions. And the CEO's daughter was always treated differently. She didn't have to prove herself. Every mistake she made was excused. Every time she needed help, someone else was assigned to fix it. I watched her show up late, leave early, and shrug off responsibilities as if rules were only meant for people like me. Still, I never imagined she would one day sit at my desk. My sacrifices were many. I missed family events, dinners, holidays, and celebrations. I lost personal time, health, and moments I could never get back. But I believed it was worth it. I believed I was building something stable. I believed the company would repay loyalty with loyalty. So I bought stocks in the company when I had extra money. I invested bonuses and saved instead of spending. I put my energy into making the place stronger. For decades, I poured myself into a job that slowly shaped my identity. It was more than just employment. It was a lifetime of effort mixed into a space that felt like mine. Meanwhile, the CEO's daughter lived a different life. She traveled, partied, and posted pictures online about her busy work life, even though everyone knew she barely showed up. She got expensive gifts from her father, benefits others worked years for, and roles she didn't earn. I never confronted her because I believed she would mature with time, but she didn't. The older she got, the more entitled she became. Everything had to be her way. Everything had to fit her comfort. She wasn't taught to work hard. She was taught that things would always be handed to her. That contrast between us grew larger every year. She climbed with no effort. I climbed with scars. She received acceptance. I earned respect with sweat. She was the future the CEO wanted for the company. I was the past that had built it. I didn't envy her. I simply wished she understood what real work meant. Yet I never imagined the day would come when she would try to erase everything I had done. But looking back now, I should have seen the signs, the small comments, the way she hovered around the office more often, the way she examined my desk during her visits, the whispers with HR, the sudden push for new leadership. All those little hints were warnings I didn't take seriously. And that was my mistake, believing that my decades of work would protect me from someone who had never earned anything. I learned painfully that effort means nothing to people who value power more than integrity. That office was my life's creation, but to her, it was just another toy she wanted to claim. Everything that happened in that office did not explode in one day. It was not one big moment that broke me or pushed me to the edge. It was a slow, steady erosion that happened piece by piece, like watching your own home rot while pretending nothing was wrong. For weeks before the day I found her sitting at my desk, there had been small signs that something was shifting. At first, I tried to ignore them because I had spent so many years trying to hold everything together. I convinced myself I was imagining things, that my age was making me overly sensitive, that the new generation simply had a different style. But deep inside, I knew something more was happening, something that had been quietly spreading long before I was allowed to see it. It began when she started moving things, not loudly, not boldly, quiet moves. I'd walk into my office each morning and notice one missing folder, one drawer rearranged, one pen holder in the wrong corner. These were my personal things, the items I'd kept for decades, the pieces of my work that made the place feel like mine. She didn't ask. She didn't mention it. It was her quiet way of showing she had power. At first, I simply placed everything back the way I liked, thinking it was an accident. But every day, something else was changed. It was a pattern, a message. And that was when the first cold feeling hit my stomach. After the objects came the comments. She always said them softly, pretending they were harmless. Comments about how she thought the office looked old-fashioned. Comments about how the company needed more energy. Comments about new ways of running things. She said them in front of others, always when the CEO was nearby, always when people were watching. And I stood there, taking it in, feeling a sting every single time. I knew what she was doing. She was building a narrative, slowly shaping the idea that I was outdated, stale, past my time. She wasn't just rearranging my office. She was rearranging how people saw me. My team began acting differently. People who had always respected me started looking past me and straight at her. Meetings that used to start with me now began with her suggestions. She made sure to sit closer to the CEO every chance she got. She laughed loudly at his jokes, interrupted people with ease, carried herself like she already belonged at the top. I watched as my own influence slowly slipped away, like sand running between my fingers, and it hurt more than I can describe. The worst part was seeing how quickly people switched sides. It didn't take much. One smile from her, one compliment, one invitation to lunch. That was enough for them to forget the years I had led them, supported them, helped them build their careers. Loyalty meant nothing in that office once she arrived. I stood there every day, watching the office I had built become a place where my name no longer held weight. They didn't fight for me. They didn't speak for me. They didn't even ask me how I felt. They watched the takeover happen and looked away, thinking that staying silent would protect them. And then came the small humiliations. Documents that used to come directly to me were sent to her. Decisions I should have made were handed over without my knowledge. Schedules were changed without consulting me. Projects I created were suddenly reassigned. She didn't need to scream or make a scene. She quietly erased pieces of my authority one by one. It was like death by 1,000 cuts, none fatal on their own, but together they weakened me until the day she finally sat in my chair, as if she had earned it, as if she had the right. The CEO pretended not to notice. Or maybe he noticed and simply didn't care. His daughter was the one he wanted to shine. I was just the barrier she needed to step past. He trained her in my presence, praised her ideas loudly, corrected me in front of her, made it clear she was his future. That was when I understood the truth. This was not accidental. This was a plan, a slow push to make me feel useless so I would step aside without a fight. But what they didn't know was that I wasn't blind. I wasn't weak, and I wasn't ready to walk away from something I had built with my own hands. The slow erosion they thought would break me did the opposite. It hardened me. It made me sharper. It made me pay attention. Every small insult, every quiet takeover, every stolen piece of my authority became fuel for the moment I would stop being quiet and start fighting back. They thought pushing me aside would be easy. They forgot who I was. The real shift began slowly, almost quietly, the way a storm starts with one strange gust before the sky breaks open. At first, I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was imagining things, that maybe the team was just nervous around the CEO's daughter, or maybe they were trying to be polite while she observed. But it wasn't politeness, it wasn't nervousness, it was control, and it was happening right in front of my eyes, piece by piece, until my authority felt thinner each day. The moment I realized something was off was when a junior staff member, someone I had trained from the first day they joined the company, walked past me and handed a report directly to her instead. Not even a glance in my direction. It was as if I had turned invisible, as if my position had simply evaporated. That small moment told me everything I needed to know. Respect was shifting, power was being redirected, and it wasn't accidental. Meetings that I scheduled began to fill with people who looked at her before speaking, not me. Team updates that were always sent to me first suddenly found their way to her inbox. And every time something like that happened, she reacted the same way. A little tilt of her chin, a slight smile, the kind that said she believed she had already won. She didn't openly tell anyone to ignore me. She didn't have to. Her presence, her entitlement, the knowledge that her father was the CEO, that alone was enough for people to start bending. It shocked me how quickly loyalty crumbled. I had led that department for years. I had given my time, my health, my energy to build it from nothing. I had trained those employees, stayed late with them, helped them grow in their careers. And yet all it took was her sitting at my desk for a few hours and pretending she belonged there for them to shift their trust. Every day became a new reminder that my voice held less weight. She replaced reports on my desk with her own edited versions, scribbling comments as if she had any authority. She forwarded emails with her instructions that contradicted my own, and employees followed her instead of me. She even removed my name from a project timeline and replaced it with hers, like she had been there from the start. It wasn't just disrespect, it was erasure, and everyone saw it happening. I tried correcting small things at first, reminding the team to follow the workflow we always used, but they hesitated, glancing at her before they answered me. She didn't fight back. She didn't argue. Instead, she just watched, quiet and confident, letting them choose her over me. She didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to make threats. She had the power of being the CEO's daughter, and she wielded that like it was a crown. Even HR began acting strangely. They had always been professional with me, but suddenly they copied her on emails that had nothing to do with her role. She wasn't even employed officially. She was only visiting the company to learn leadership. Yet somehow, she positioned herself between me and every decision I made. I could feel the walls closing in. Every time I walked into the office, conversations stopped. People whispered, papers were shuffled. She watched everything like a queen sitting on a throne that once belonged to me. The worst part wasn't losing my desk. It wasn't losing my seat in meetings. It wasn't even losing my voice. The worst part was seeing the team I built, people I loved, people I trusted, start to treat me like a guest in my own department. Their respect didn't disappear overnight. It was taken from them, piece by piece, by the influence she exerted without ever saying a single harsh word. That was what made it powerful. She didn't have to humiliate me directly. She just placed herself in my space, and the rest followed her shadow. By the end of that week, I realized something painfully clear. She wasn't just trying to replace me physically. She was replacing me emotionally, socially, professionally. She wanted my authority, my respect, my years of hard work, and she was taking it, one quiet theft at a time. The desk was only the beginning. The real danger was watching people slowly treat her like the one in charge, even though she had never earned a single bit of the position she was stealing. But I didn't break. I didn't snap. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because if she wanted to steal my authority quietly, then she didn't know what it looked like when I decided to take everything back. When I finally uncovered the truth behind everything that had been happening in my office, it was not in a dramatic moment or some loud confrontation. It came quietly, in the same slow and steady way the disrespect had arrived over the past few months. I was working late, long after most people had already gone home, finishing reports that used to be handled by my team before the CEO's daughter gradually started inserting herself into every project. I reached into a drawer to grab an old file and realized the documents I normally kept there had been shifted. The drawer was too neat, too organized, almost like someone had arranged it for a performance. Something felt wrong. I opened the folders and realized pages were missing, replaced by freshly printed sheets I had never signed and certainly never authorized. My stomach tightened. I knew her presence had grown, but this was more than arrogance. This was planning. I logged into my email, something I rarely did outside office hours, and noticed a strange folder stored inside the company's shared drive with my initials on it. I never created such a folder. Curiosity mixed with dread as I opened it. Inside, I found copies of emails between the CEO and his daughter. They were not written in harsh tones or with obvious malice. That almost made it worse. The words were calm, almost cheerful, as they discussed my declining performance, difficulty adjusting to new systems, and emerging complaints from staff that I had never heard about. They were constructing a version of me that didn't exist, a weaker, confused, outdated version they could easily push aside. They planned to terminate me in the upcoming quarter, citing a natural transition into retirement. The phrase made my hands go cold. For years, I had given everything to this office. I was the one who opened it early during storms, the one who stayed long during crises, the one who cleaned up mistakes others made, the one who trained new recruits, making sure they felt confident even when I was exhausted. I had built the trust of clients, the respect of my coworkers, and the stability of the office when others collapsed under pressure. And yet, in a few typed lines, they were erasing decades of loyalty as if I had never mattered. Every sentence felt like a quiet betrayal, one layered on top of the other, until the weight became almost unbearable. The deeper I read, the more the plan unfolded in painful detail. They intended to replace me without telling me in advance. They already created a transition timeline. They already drafted a statement for the staff. They were just waiting for the right moment to push me out. And the CEO's daughter wasn't just participating in the plan, she was leading it. She wrote long messages describing how she wanted to reshape the office culture, which she said was held back by older leadership stuck in old ways. She never said my name directly, but she didn't need to. Every word pointed to me. This wasn't just about the desk she had taken or the files she had moved. This was about positioning herself as the new authority while turning me into a problem they had to transition out. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, feeling a cold clarity settle inside me. It wasn't anger yet. It wasn't even sadness. It was the sharp understanding that the people I trusted with my work, my time, and my loyalty thought I was too quiet, too old, and too soft to fight back. They thought they could toss me out like an outdated file. They assumed I would walk away quietly, maybe cry privately, maybe accept it as life moving on. They believed I had no strength left, that years of service had somehow made me weak. But as I sat alone in that office, with the overhead lights humming softly and the rest of the building silent, something shifted inside me. I realized that the one mistake they had made, the one mistake that would cost them everything, was thinking I wouldn't notice, thinking I wouldn't push back, thinking I had no power. They didn't consider that loyalty creates memory, that experience builds awareness, and that quiet people often hold the sharpest understanding of how things truly run. They underestimated the one person who had been paying attention all along, And so, I gathered every email, printed every file, saved every document, and copied every message they tried to hide. I packed the truth into a folder of my own, one they would never see coming. They had built a plan to erase me. They didn't realize I had just uncovered every piece of it. When everything finally became clear, I knew I could not fight this battle alone. The plan to replace me was bigger than I first thought. It was not just the CEO's daughter acting on her own. It was a chain of people protecting her because of her last name, her influence, and the comfort they felt when they believed I was too old, too quiet, or too tired to push back. I had spent years building a reputation for being calm and respectful, and they mistook that for weakness. But this time, I needed someone who saw my strength, not their assumptions. That was when I reached out to my old mentor, the one person who had watched me grow, struggle, and rise through the company. I dialed his number, my hands steady, because I knew exactly what I needed to do. When he answered, I explained everything from the moment I found her sitting at my desk to the emails I discovered late at night. There was no drama in my voice, only truth. He listened carefully. He didn't interrupt. He didn't question my judgment. When I finished, he sighed in a way that told me he had expected something like this to happen eventually. He always warned me that people with power but no experience would try to push aside the ones who actually did the work. He asked me to send every file, every screenshot, every printed copy. I gathered it all and emailed it to him within minutes. When he saw the evidence, he said one sentence that changed everything. You have enough to protect yourself, and take back your position. His confidence reminded me of who I was before years of stress and quiet acceptance dulled my edge. I wasn't just an older employee waiting to retire. I was the one who kept the department together. I was the one who trained half the staff. I was the one who built that office from nothing. My mentor connected me with a lawyer, a woman who specialized in corporate protection cases. I showed her the emails, the hidden meeting agendas, the documents the CEO's daughter had no right to sign. She read through everything slowly, taking notes, marking dates, and highlighting the parts that mattered. She looked up and nodded. You're in the strongest position here, she said. They think you don't know your rights, but you do. And now you have proof. She explained the steps one by one, reporting protocol violations, misuse of authority, unauthorized access to official documents, and harassment through workplace replacement tactics. She helped me organize my evidence into a clean, chronological timeline that even the CEO couldn't ignore. Every detail had a date, a witness, a digital trail. Every step she took made my foundation stronger and their lies weaker. For the first time in weeks, I felt like the ground under my feet was stable again. I wasn't just reacting, I was planning. I wasn't just defending myself, I was preparing to reclaim what was mine. My mentor kept checking in, reminding me to stay calm, to move strategically, and to let the lawyer guide the process. I followed every instruction, not out of fear, but out of respect for the work it took to get me this far. By the time the documents were ready, I no longer felt hurt. I no longer felt betrayed. I felt prepared. They thought I would cry, walk away, or beg to keep my job. They expected me to disappear quietly. They didn't expect me to gather allies. They didn't expect me to have proof. They didn't expect me to rise after they pushed me down. But that is exactly what I was about to do. The meeting was set for 9 in the morning, but I arrived 30 minutes early. I wanted to sit in that quiet conference room, breathe in the still air, and remind myself of everything I had survived to reach this moment. I had spent decades building my work, building my reputation, and building the strength to stand up when someone tried to destroy it. Today was not just about my office or my title. It was about dignity. It was about proving that my age, my years of service, and my quiet nature did not make me weak. When the door finally opened, the CEO entered with a rushed look, followed by HR, and then her, the CEO's daughter, walking in with the same smug confidence she had shown the day she sat at my desk. But this time, I wasn't intimidated. She adjusted her expensive jacket, sat across from me, and crossed her legs like she was already in control. She looked everywhere but at me, confident she would leave that room untouched. I folded my hands calmly and waited. My lawyer placed the file on the table without a single word. The sound of it hitting the wood made her eyes flicker, the first crack in her calm. HR opened the folder and froze. Inside were printed emails, time-stamped files, messages she had sent to team members, and screenshots of her manipulation. They exposed everything: how she planned to remove me, how she bragged about replacing me, how she altered my team's assignments behind my back, and how she tried to frame her interference as my failure. The CEO's eyes widened as he flipped through the pages. His daughter's face changed slowly from confidence to confusion, then to fear. She reached out to snatch the papers back, but HR pulled them away, keeping them at the center of the table. I didn't speak yet. It wasn't my turn. My lawyer explained each piece of evidence calmly, methodically, without emotion. Every sentence hit her like a blow. Her breathing became shallow. She glanced at her father, waiting for him to protect her, but he looked ashamed, almost embarrassed by what she had done. He tried to speak, but my lawyer held up a hand and continued. The room felt heavy. Even the air seemed to pause. The truth was no longer a secret whispered behind closed doors. It was written on paper, undeniable, in the hands of the very people she had manipulated. When my lawyer finished, the CEO finally spoke, his voice quieter than usual. He asked his daughter if the emails were real. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She tried to form excuses, but every sentence collapsed before it could leave her throat. She knew she had been caught. She knew there was no escape. HR cleared her throat and asked me if I had anything to add. Only then did I lift my eyes and look directly at the woman who had tried to erase me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply said the line that ended everything. Sign the papers or face the consequences. Your choice. Her face drained of color. My lawyer slid forward a resignation letter already drafted. It wasn't written in anger. It wasn't even written emotionally. It was clean, factual, and final. She picked it up with shaking hands. Tears formed in her eyes, not because she felt sorry, but because the power she thought she owned was slipping away. She looked at her father again, silently begging him to intervene, but he lowered his gaze. He knew she had crossed too many lines to save her now. Minutes felt like hours. The room watched as she held the pen. Her fingers trembled. Her breath shook. And finally, she signed. The moment her signature touched the page, the air shifted. It felt like a weight lifted off my chest. Not revenge, not satisfaction, just quiet justice. She pushed the paper back across the table, her hand unsteady. HR gathered the documents quickly, as if sealing the truth inside them forever. I stood slowly, not rushing, not gloating. I didn't need to celebrate. The truth had done all the work. The CEO muttered an apology, barely audible. His daughter kept her eyes on the table, unable to look at me. My lawyer opened the door, letting in a wave of fresh hallway air. As I stepped out, I didn't look back. Not once. I didn't need to see her expression to know the outcome. Her silence told me everything. I had walked into that room prepared to defend my life's work, and I walked out with all of it intact, while she walked out with nothing but the cost of her own arrogance. When the meeting finally ended, the room felt strangely quiet, as if every sound had been sucked out through the walls. The CEO's daughter sat frozen, her face drained of confidence, her hands trembling slightly as she stared at the resignation papers in front of her. She had walked into the meeting expecting applause, expecting a coronation, expecting to be handed everything I had built. Instead, she faced the truth of her own actions, written in black and white, signed by witnesses, backed by an attorney who knew every line of employment law. She had no ground left to stand on, no lies left to hide behind, no one left willing to back her. HR had shifted uncomfortably in their seats, each of them quietly realizing they had played along with her arrogance for far too long. Even the CEO, her own father, avoided her eyes. He looked older in that moment, like a man forced to confront the consequences of all the strings he pulled and how violently they had snapped back at him. I didn't say a single triumphant word. I just sat still, hands folded, watching everything unfold exactly the way it needed to. Sometimes silence is the strongest power you can have. She signed the resignation, each stroke of the pen sharp and shaking like she was carving her own pride out of herself. When she pushed the papers toward HR, her eyes were glassy, not with remorse, but with shock, disbelief that the person she had underestimated had turned out to be the one to end her climb. For once, the smirk she always wore was gone. She wasn't the golden girl anymore. She was just another employee who thought entitlement was a job qualification. They told her she had 10 minutes to gather her things, 10 minutes to walk through an office she thought she owned, 10 minutes to leave the place she had tried to take from me. I stood in the hallway as she exited, her heels clicking fast, her expression stiff. People watched quietly as she passed, each one remembering the way she had barked orders, rearranged desks, insulted longtime staff, acted like the building belonged to her. No one said a word, not even goodbye. Even the people who once tried to impress her now stepped aside, giving her a clear path to the elevator, as if touching her would curse them too. When the doors closed behind her, the HR director exhaled heavily, like he had been holding his breath for weeks. The CEO tried to say something to me, a half apology, half attempt at saving face, but I simply nodded and walked away. I didn't need his words. I didn't want them. He had shown me where his loyalty stood, and it hadn't been with the woman who built the department from scratch. My victory didn't depend on his remorse. My victory was that I was still standing, while the one who tried to destroy me was already gone. When I walked back into my office, it felt like stepping into a memory I had almost lost. My chair was back in place. My files were arranged the way I kept them. My nameplate sat on the desk again, polished, centered. My team gathered near the doorway, hesitant at first, unsure if it was safe to celebrate. But when I nodded, offering a small smile, the tension broke. They approached with quiet relief, each of them offering support, gratitude, and the kind of respect that can't be forced or faked. They had seen everything. They had stayed silent when they needed to, and they stood beside me now that the air was clear again. The CEO sent a formal email reinstating my authority, apologizing for any misunderstandings during the transition. He tried to soften the blow of what had happened, but everyone reading the message already knew the truth. He had let his daughter run wild, and I had been the only one brave enough to stop her. I didn't correct him. I didn't need public praise. My win was the quiet return to normal. The steady heartbeat of my department working again under someone who had earned their trust. The consequence for them wasn't my anger. It was watching me reclaim my place without fear, without apology, without bending. And the greatest consequence of all was this. I walked back into my office not as someone who had almost lost everything, but as someone who had proven she could never be removed by force, fear, or entitlement. I was exactly where I belonged. When everything finally settled and the office returned to its quiet routine, I realized how much the entire experience had changed me. Not just as a worker, not just as a woman in her later years, but as a person who had spent a lifetime being told to stay quiet, be patient, don't make trouble, and let things go. After confronting the CEO, his daughter, and the entire team that had tried to push me out, I felt something I had not felt in years. Calm strength. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was steady, clear, and deeply rooted inside me. It felt like the strength I had been giving everyone else for years had finally come back to me. And for once, I didn't push it away. My team approached me slowly in the days after the confrontation. Some of them looked embarrassed, some guilty, and some simply confused, as if they were seeing me for the first time. I didn't blame them. People often follow the loudest person in the room, the one with the power, the one who looks like they belong. The CEO's daughter walked around with confidence she never earned, and that confidence fooled many of them. I spent years being the reliable one, the woman who stayed late, fixed mistakes quietly, and never complained. People like that are easy to forget until they are gone. But I didn't want revenge against my team. I wanted them to learn something. I wanted them to understand that the quiet ones in the room are often the strongest and the most dangerous to underestimate. When HR formally apologized and the CEO offered a public statement, I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I didn't say, "I told you so." I sat there, hands folded, watching them shift uncomfortably as they tried to put into words what they had failed to acknowledge for years. They promised new rules, better oversight, and respect for senior staff. Those words didn't impress me. Words are easy. I wanted actions, and over the next few weeks, I saw them. Meetings were handled differently. My voice was asked for, not ignored. My decisions were respected, not second-guessed. And slowly, the air in the office changed. It wasn't perfect, of course, but it was different in a way that mattered. I also reached out to the younger women in the office, the ones who reminded me of myself decades ago, the ones who worked hard, did everything right, but got overshadowed by louder, more privileged people. I didn't lecture them. I didn't warn them dramatically. I simply shared what happened, how I handled it, and what I learned. They listened closely, some wide-eyed, some shaking their heads in disbelief, some tearing up quietly. I told them the truth, that respect is not given freely in this world, especially to women, especially to older women, especially to women who aren't born into certain families. But I also told them that respect can be taken back. You can claim it, defend it, and protect it, no matter what age you are. At home, I spent days reflecting on what happened. I made coffee, sat in silence, and replayed all the moments that led up to the girl sitting at my desk that morning. Every little disrespect I had brushed off. Every moment I had told myself to be patient. Every time I had smiled instead of speaking up. I realized how easy it is to let things slide, thinking they will get better or go away. But they don't. They grow. They spread. They turn into bigger problems that eventually swallow your peace. Standing up for myself wasn't just about keeping my job. It was about reclaiming my identity. I forgave myself for staying quiet for so long. I forgave myself for trusting people who didn't deserve it. I forgave myself for the patience that turned into silence. But I did not forget. Forgetting would mean losing the lesson, and I wanted that lesson to stay with me, firm, clear, and ready to be used again if needed. In the end, I rebuilt my own sense of authority. I made sure my boundaries were strong and visible. I promised myself that no one, not a CEO, not his daughter, not any person in power, would ever make me feel small in a place I helped build. I had spent years giving everything to my work, and now, for the first time, I was also protecting myself with the same dedication. When I think about all of it now, I don't feel anger. I feel clarity, strength, peace, because living a long life teaches you one thing. People may try to take what you built, but they can never take who you became. That belongs to you alone. And that is the real ending to this story. Not revenge, not victory, but self-respect. The kind that stays even when the lights go off, even when the doors close, even when no one is watching. The kind that says quietly, "I know who I am." And finally, after all these years, I do.